And now British Airways has also begun letting thousands of workers go because of the impact of this pandemic. And many of those who remain will face steep pay cuts and lose benefits. Thousands of employees are also expected to be dismissed. British Airways says more than 6,000 workers have applied for voluntary redundancy. The company lost more than $900 million between April and June. Well, we can now speak to Cathy Feingold. She is the director of the International Department at the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, also known as the AFL-CIO. That's the largest federation of unions in the United States, and she joins us now from Washington, D.C. Cathy, thank you for being with us. I do want to ask you about the U.S. labor market, but let's start with what's happening globally. We've seen these huge job losses, huge pay cuts for many of those who've managed to keep their jobs. Is there any kind of recourse for workers here?
Well, absolutely. I mean, workers are trying their best to stand up. The labor movement is working in Europe. You just talked about what's happening with British Airways. There, the unions are pushing back against these layoffs that are happening. They're working with the European Commission to shape policy, short-term work arrangements. So the labor movement is really active in shaping policies to protect workers. But far too many companies are taking advantage of the COVID-19 to weaken the contracts that they've negotiated with unions and to really shed way too many of their workers.
Cathy, during this pandemic, we've also seen the converse, I guess, people being forced to work, as well as workers being rounded up for protesting about their conditions in Bangladesh, India, the Maldives. Has there been a crackdown by authorities? Do you get that sense?
Absolutely. We are seeing in the garment supply chain in particular. Yesterday, there was a report released showing how many of the major brands producing in countries like Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Cambodia, the suppliers are using this opportunity to fire workers, especially workers who've been speaking out about the lack of health and safety protection in these factories, the lack of the wages that are owed to them. So this is a real crisis. It's really important that major companies respect worker rights, make sure they're respecting union contracts, and ensure there are safe workplaces for workers.
Cathy, moving now to the US, how should I put it? Less bad news this month when it comes to jobs numbers? I mean, these figures are still huge. Now, when you look at this small recovery because of reopenings and then that coupled with the ongoing spread that we're seeing of the virus, where do you see the trajectory going from here?
I would say workers are on a cliff. As we say today, Friday, we're looking towards Congress. We're looking to the Republicans to respond to the HEROES Act. That was the proposal put forward by the House over 80 days ago that was going to extend some of the unemployment benefits, really address some of the health and safety concerns, deal with our aviation industry. Right now, there is no answer for working people, and working people are frightened. You have just covered stories from around the world, and American workers are in the same situation. They're going back to unsafe workplaces. We have no national standard for health and safety protection, so it's a piecemeal process in this country, and workers are facing a cliff.
Well, you talk about workplace protection. I do want to ask you about that because there's been so much talk during this pandemic of essential workers, the people who are working in meat packing plants, delivering groceries, who've been at more risk of catching the virus and who have caught the virus. Has there been enough protection for those sorts of industries throughout this period?
Absolutely not. We are seeing with the workers, for example, the Instacart workers, the ones who are delivering groceries, they do not have proper protection. We saw workers being forced back in California for Tesla in the auto industry. They did not have proper protections. We have all of the people in the meatpacking plants who didn't have proper protections. So this is a serious issue. The Uber and Lyft drivers, you know, we had Uber giving protections only to their office worker, but not to their drivers. We must have one single standard that the federal government releases so that all workers know they can return to a safe workplace. And that's not happening right now.
Especially as we're seeing more and more states reopen. Cathy Feingold there, the director of the International Department at the AFL-CIO. Thank you for being with us on Al Jazeera. Great to get your thoughts, Cathy.
Thanks so much.